Well, Talking Church today is a fun episode. We get to talk about worship and production, and with me is Aaron Johnson and Caleb Bohr, and I will let you guys share a little bit about what you guys do and how you work together, and we'll just dive right in. It'll be great.
All right. Should I go first?
Yeah, great.
Logan, thanks. My name is Aaron Johnson. I am the local creative pastor, and I oversee worship and production along with Caleb here.
You play drums?
And I play drums. So I come from a unique perspective that way with being overseeing worship, but I am not actually like
From an MD's perspective.
Yeah, from a music director and making sure that the worship leaders that are singing are set up well. So I'm taking care of a lot of the behind the scenes and drumming at times.
Great.
Yeah. I'm the production director, so all things audio, video, lighting at all of our campuses, stage design for events, weekend services, on-site events, off-site events, all that fun stuff. And I get
a lot of events.
Yeah. A lot of events, yep. Yeah. And I get to lead a really awesome team of 12 people at our campuses and from a central and broadcast location as well. So
yeah. Now I recognize for a lot of people listening, it's a luxury for them to say, okay, to even have two people in this area. There's a lot of churches that would have they would be one person. That's
I've done that.
Yeah, both of your roles. Caleb, you've done that. Yep. At a church, and so we know that there's a wide range of people listening. Maybe there's some churches that are like us that have many staff in that area. But I hope that today we can maybe inspire some things with maybe what a large team could look like, but also kind of break it down on how we can manage it. Even it works at smaller campuses where it's a contract person that is doing production and maybe a part-time worship leader or a volunteer worship leader even. We try to make it work across all different areas. But when you think about how production and worship work together, again, if it's one person, it's the left side and right side of the brain. But how have you guys worked together from, even though you also have a lot of production stuff, worship is kind of your main side of things. How have you guys learned to work together over the time that you have?
Yeah, I just do what he says.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
Right. Man, where to start with that? I would say how we have done that is, first of all, I think this is kind of, I think it's really important, but maybe it's obvious, but like build a great relationship just bottom level. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like actually like each other.
Yeah, I have a ton of respect for this guy, and we've known each other for a long, long time. And so that and respecting what each other brings to the table is really, really important. Like, I don't view what Caleb and the production guys do as just tactical service stuff. I really view that as you're creating environments and ministry just like the worship leaders are, just like the messages. Without what they bring to the table, the experience in the room wouldn't be very good. They might not be able to see lyrics, see sermons, scriptures, all that sort of stuff. So the role that production brings is so valuable. And so I think sometimes there's like a misnomer that's just like a tactical thing that happens, but it's so important to the ministry. So first of all, I have a high respect for that.
Yeah,
So,
from the production side, we kind of take a little, like, it feels like two parts to a whole, where like worship is seeing production as artists, and we are doing what we do in a very similar way as worship does it. When I'm challenging the people who I get the opportunity to lead, I'm saying we are servants. Like, that's what we're there to do. We are serving the needs of the event, the needs of the weekend service, the needs of the people on the stage. We're there to serve. Like, that's the approach that I think we try to take. And going back, Aaron and I have known each other for a long time. We went to college together. So legitimately liking the people that you're working with is huge. And it always goes back to relationship. Like, it's always relationship, mutual respect for each other. But knowing that you're in the trenches together, it's not one versus the other, which happens a decent amount between production and worship.
Yeah.
It sort of feels like you guys are the stage people, we're the back people.
Sure.
We try to make you sound good and look good and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's a natural place for contention to arise, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you have to be together in it, mutual respect. And then going back, if I can just quickly, lots of churches, I mentioned that I was a worship leader and production lead and content creator. Like I was the worship production, film, comm department, like all of it, and did it with meddling results, I feel like. But for the people who are that, volunteers are your life. Like they are the lifeblood of what you do. That's still true even when we have a bigger staff than what I had at my previous church. But even to a higher extent, it was a single location. But your volunteers are your lifeblood, and they are. It's not a means to an end, right? Like you're developing them and wanting them to grow, but they're the lifeblood of your ministry.
Just a perspective thing. Again, every church is at a different perspective. But like you mentioned, volunteers every weekend between production and worship. I mean, well over 100. I mean, at our campuses. Easy, I mean, maybe 200 volunteers
across all the campuses.
That are happening in those specific areas.
Yeah.
So it's crazy to think about.
Yep.
Totally. I would go back, like on a practical level. We're going to say how we work together. You know, obviously all the relational stuff is really important and respect and all that. But on a practical level, like without clear communication between the two of us, which we have often. We don't even have it like a Thursday morning, we have our set kind of like run through of the service that we do with the experienced team, run through the graphics and everything. But without clear communication, he can't do his job well, and I can't do my job well. So what that means is like we will typically, especially on like special events, the weekend flow kind of like happens. Like we know that we're going to have a worship set up front and we're going to go into offering and announcements and we're going to end with a message. Like that hardly ever changes. So that flow will happen. But when we're coming up with any kind of special events, there's an extra song, there's an opener thing, whether that's in a service or a special event or whatever. We sit down and we try to talk about how do we want this thing to feel? Like what is the first part of this service feel like? And to me, that goes even before the service start. I like to think, what's 10 minutes before the service? And so we'll talk about that, like what's on the screens, what audio track are we doing? We try to often bring a custom audio track that somebody in the church makes to, like if it's a Christmas service, we want it to feel a certain way. So we'll often talk about that, like what's the mood, what's the vibe of when someone walks into the service 10 minutes before, all the way through them leaving. What's the lighting? What's the mood? How does that lighting, this is a song we're doing. What do you see lighting wise? How can this happen? Here's what we're doing on the instrumentation on the stage. How can lighting support that, you know? And so clear communication, just about all the details of the service helps us both do our jobs well.
When you think about those, I mean, a big question, and I'm sure there's a lot of worship and production people listening to this when they see the title, but there's pastors, people that are not in that, maybe working with volunteers or working with other staff members. How do you guys balance the production excellence value with the first part of the importance of the ministry that it does? Because I think there's a lead pastor listening to this right now that says, yeah, that's awesome and great, but I have, we know there's budget constraints, there's resourcing constraints. We still have that conversation. I mean, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, we had that conversation. We're still having that conversation. So I want people to know that it's not like we figured it out. It's all perfect. We have the right amount of staff. We have the right amount of money. But there are realities to whether it be a special event or even just a weekend service. Oh, we want an extra song. Okay, well, that song you want played, maybe we don't have the skilled enough musicians to play that song. Or there's a number of different issues that could arise. How do we balance the scope of a project? Again, it's not perfect, but to where we can start making decisions. Because I find that without you guys, I might not even know where to go. And not everyone has you guys. And so what would be some filters that you would give to people in special events? We met conference just happened. We did an opener for that. We did an opener last year at conference that has film support. Sparkle is a huge thing. Even Christmas Eve, Easter, big times. How do we start to establish the scope and then start to move forward?
Yeah, I can tackle that one quick. So I think one of the things that exists is a gap in knowledge between what we do and maybe a lead pastor.
Sure.
Which should exist.
Yeah,
A lead
skill
pastor
set,
has
yeah.
no reason to know all of these things. What usually doesn't exist but can feel like it exists is a gap in care. Like, I don't care what you do. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Just figure it out.
Sure.
What our job is, especially in production, is to, I challenge my team to lead with yes. Can we do this? Can we pull this off? Yes. Here's what it costs. And I don't mean just dollars. Here's what it costs in the hours. Here's what it costs in volunteer time. Here's what it costs in risk. Like, if this is a late ad, the risk of it failing or not going exactly the way the lead pastor has it in his mind goes up.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can do that. Here's what it costs in those 4 areas, right?
Yeah.
That helps to mitigate and bring down that gap that can feel like a gap in, I don't care how you do it, what you do it. But we cover that gap in knowledge, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's what I try. Lead with yes and tell us what it costs in more than just the dollar area. Like, it can't always be, no, we can't do that. I need more money. No, there are other ways to accomplish these things. And then the other part of it is the thing that costs $0 is being a good architect spiritually and emotionally for how you're putting together all of these different elements. That's a big part of what we do, especially with our large events. People can't handle an hour and 15 or an hour 30 of constant emotional, like, we're trying to rip your heart out, or constant spiritual hitting on the same thing. You've got to take people on an arc spiritually and emotionally. That's free. It just takes the time and the effort from both a lead pastor who knows what he's preaching on, who knows what he wants to accomplish in a service, communicating that to worship and production, and working together to architect that service spiritually and emotionally.
Yeah, that's great.
That was good.
Good job. No. When you talk about like pulling something off that we're doing and like budget, and you talked about maybe not having the right musicians, whatever, I try to not think of all the ways that it can't happen first.
Sure.
And I try to go, okay, what do I want? What am I inspired by? And the money will allow that or not allow that at some point. Now, often the thing, if it's a good idea and it's a ministry idea, you often can get there in other ways. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to have spend this amount of money to like pull this heartstring on somebody, and like this connection with God costs this much money. You know, usually you don't have to make that call. Praise God.
Yeah.
But, there's going to be some other things. I try to go, okay, everything's on the table. Let's do this. This is what I'm inspired by. Now, almost inevitably, it will probably have to be scaled differently, because something that I see at a concert or some song I hear, whatever, is like amazing. And
Harry
it's like,
Styles did it,
yeah,
so we
it's like,
can.
we can do it. Well, maybe, but we could do something like that.
Sure.
And I'm not trying to do exactly that thing anyway. I don't want to rip it exactly, but what can I do that's maybe a different scale to that?
Yeah.
And there's I actually enjoy that challenge, because that's where I think real creativity comes, because it's like, well, I don't have unlimited budget, so I have to think of this a different way.
Yeah.
I have to, like songs, you brought up that. That's really crazy. Like, can we pull this song off at 9 campuses?
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Like,
sure.
that's a filter that I run through my mind every time that I pick a special. Like, is this our biggest campus, they can probably do that, but what is this going to feel like at a smaller campus? And sometimes it's like, well, let's pick a couple songs that people can choose from.
Sure.
That's one solution. Another solution is just pick a song that everybody can do.
Yeah.
Or, like there's maybe some other solutions, like tracks really help with that. Like, they can supplement campuses that maybe can't pull it off as well. But I typically don't go, I'm going to make this awesome at the biggest campus and just forget about the rest of the campuses.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know if that's really what we're talking about, but
makes
that's not a big win-win for the church, or just do that event at just one location, then you can pull it off, but it's not a win to blow it up at one place and not have it possible anywhere else.
Yeah. And I think for people that maybe are single site, I think it still applies in the sense of like, are we going to set an unrealistic expectation of like, all right, we're going to hire the best singer and bring him in, and then it just makes your team like, oh wow, we showed on Easter, all the new people got the guest worship leader that was in town that is really, really good, and then it's like, well, I didn't highlight our team at all. When we look at, obviously there's a lot of decisions that need to be made. I was thinking about when you said getting inspiration for conference 2 years ago. I think it was a Toyota commercial that we all watched. We all were crying like in the
that messed me up.
Yeah, it was like the the Paralympics thing, and that was our inspiration for it. And we made a beautiful film in response to that.
Totally.
But I would say that we have the opportunity, and I don't want to use the word luxury, but the empowerment that we get to make that decision. I think for a lot of churches and maybe a lot of production staffs and worship team, it comes directly from maybe the lead pastor, and maybe the lead pastor's listening and they say, I'm the one who comes up with these creative ideas. Caleb, maybe if you want to talk about this a little bit too, and AJ, even you've been here many years to see how that's grown. How has that, how do you bring, I'll sum it up this way. How do you bring ideas up, and how do you respond when you kind of answer that already, but how you respond when ideas come down? But what would you say? How do you bring ideas up that aren't necessarily the lead pastor's idea, but you guys carry the weight of services now, but someone else maybe who doesn't know that if their pastor's going to listen?
Yeah, I'll speak to that real quickly if that's okay. Like, I'll speak to that in terms of like songs.
Sure.
Songs is a creative idea that would be going up unless your lead pastor is writing songs and sending them down. But that's not really what's happening in our world.
Yeah.
So the worship leaders that are writing songs here, years ago, we were just writing songs, and they helped the church, but I wouldn't say that they were like inspiring up. They were great songs and they worked well in church. There was a key moment where a song was written that actually inspired Pastor Rob to change and gave him language for Easter. It was both sides. Mm-hmm. That was the first time that I can remember where it was like, oh, we're really actually giving ideas up now.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have been able to do that if we weren't writing in the flow of the church calendar. Like, we knew we had an Easter song coming up, so we can't be writing an Easter song in April.
Yeah.
Like, we could finish it, but we won't be able to use it for Easter. So we were hustling to get that song because we thought it had a chance to be something for Easter that year. And we were hustling in January to try we got to get this. If this isn't done by February, we can't get it in the flow enough, early enough. So that's one way, is getting ahead of the calendar and trying to lead up an idea that way.
Yeah.
And now I think a lot of our songs are actually doing that for the church.
Which is our theme for this year, Ask, Seek, Pray. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. So that's one thought I had about
on the ideas coming down to you. That happens too. So a couple of things that we've tried to do when ideas come to us that we are now expected to execute. If it's an awesome idea and you can make it happen the way your lead pastor wants it to happen, right? Like, if you're on board with it, let's go. If it's something that is lofty and too much for you to figure out or budget or whatever the restraints are, I like to try to go a layer or two deep and go, okay, you saw this thing on whatever TV show, you heard this song, whatever it is. What about it made you want to do this in a service? What are you trying to accomplish with the feeling and the tone of video, song, whatever giant thing you saw on, I don't know, America's Got Talent, or like The Voice that we can't pull off at our church? What about it hit you to the point where you wanted to bring it to us and make this happen at a church? Once you peel that first layer back of they zoomed all the way in to go, this is the idea I want to accomplish. Take a step back and go, why? How can I accomplish the goal that you're really looking for what the people in our church need? And let's talk about how we can accomplish that. On the opposite side, maybe your lead pastor dug up a song from 15 years ago and wants to do that song. And you're like, well, it's not as cutting edge or new as I want it to be. Same idea. What is there in that song that hit you spiritually or emotionally that makes you want to do that? Is there something more current, more doable, more attainable that we can accomplish that exact same thing in a way that we actually feel proud of?
I mean, I've had those conversations with Pastor Rob. He would suggest a song that in his mind would work really, really great. And he's right, but it felt like to us a little bit like dated, not quite great. So, instead of just saying, no, we're not going to do that. That's a dumb song. That's not a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Hey, I think this song would still accomplish this, and you bring an example, and it's a little bit newer. It's something we wrote. It's in our house. It's in, what I mean? Something like that. He hasn't had a problem with that.
Yeah.
Because he's just looking for the moment, like to hang the sermon on or whatever.
But I think also there are times where the answer is just, okay,
100%.
and it's okay, we're going to do that. And you can't say okay and then do it horrible and say, told you.
Yeah.
Once you say the okay, we're going to give this our absolute best. And then on the other side, I mean, I even think of AJ with conference. I said, Hope Has a Name has to be played. I said, it's a non-negotiable. I don't care. But you said, hey, could it be a different rendition? Sure. And we did that and it was great. But there are moments like that where who's ever in charge of the event is going to make a decision. But I love what you said is asking the why. Because what I've been thinking this whole time is there's going to be somebody that's critical of this whole podcast saying, you guys are talking about special things and like we're a church. Like it doesn't matter. America's Got Talent, Harry Styles. What are you talking about? Like you shouldn't even be looking at that. And I would say, sure, like yes, but also like there are moments where if you're looking at that for inspiration, maybe that's not right. Maybe you shouldn't be doing that special thing. Maybe you should be focusing on the sermon or focusing on getting your chords right and remembering the lyrics. Sure. Let's put that aside to say that's what you should be doing first. This is extra above. But I also think that, you look at God and how creative he is, and God is a God of creativity. He is an artist. I mean, the Webb telescope pictures are just coming out recently, and it's like, oh my goodness, God is just such a beautiful artist. And so I think there are absolutely ways to have that artistry and creativity that points people to Jesus. Yes. And I think that's the distinction that I would say that in our meetings, we always talk about. If ever a special moment points people to us or points people to our guitar or points people to the singer, we've done it wrong.
Dude, totally. I couldn't agree more. Like the word that I always keep in my mind is like empathy. Like a creative idea just for the sake of creativity is just a flex. If you have enough money and enough talent, you can pull it off. But like, what is the purpose behind it? How is it helping serve ministry? So it's like, I always try to put myself in this seat of like a person in the middle of the room who isn't really kind of on the fence with church and God, and like, what is this impact? How does this help the message that we're trying to serve? And, I think you brought up that opener a couple of years ago. Every moment in that planning of that, we had the filter of a pastor.
Yeah.
Because that's who was going to be in the room, pastors, and having them remember who God was. So every decision was made with that. So you have to keep that in mind, and your creative, the stuff that you're bringing to that should help that purpose, not just for the sake of being a fun idea,
Yeah, that's so good. When you think about, again, those listening, there's a couple different camps, but what would be one thing that you would say to a production or worship staff member that you say, hey, when you're planning something special, a special part of service, or whether that be a special event or just a special part in your service, what maybe would be something you haven't shared yet that you think would be a great tool for them? And then maybe the same thing in response to that lead pastor to say how, as somebody who is that person, maybe a way that you'd love to work with that lead pastor. Again, you're not talking to Pastor Rob here, but just helping people kind of process through that. I just want to make sure if there's anything else. I know we kind of did a little crash course here on special events, but I don't want to make sure that we don't miss anything you wanted to share.
Yeah, two things on that. So in the service, when you're talking about a special event, getting into that and getting out of it is super important. And I've shared this before in a couple of contexts, but we showed a film one time at an event that literally, like not literally, ripped the hearts out of these women. And it was like so emotional. And we didn't provide a place, not literally, but didn't provide a place for them to respond to that.
Yeah.
It was that film. And then I kid you not, it was the guest speaker. That was our plan, going into it.
Wow.
That was not fair to the guest speaker.
Yeah.
we did back-to-back events. They were the same thing 2 times in a row, and we fixed that. Like we changed it and played a song there to allow people to respond to what we just did. How That's you really get into these special events and how you get out of them. If it's celebratory, have somebody high energy and get people pumped up. Like it doesn't have to be that. It can be anywhere across the spectrum. But you have to know how you're letting people respond to those.
Yeah, I was at an event the other day, and there was a tongue and interpretation, and then right after the interpretation, the MC was like, "All right, you guys can take your seats." I was like, "Whoa!" like what? Yeah. So it's knowing, and again, he wasn't planning for that, but he was just doing what he was doing. But it's trying to figure out how in those special moments you can land.
Yeah. The second part of it is emotional intelligence with your leader, the person you report directly to, your lead pastor. You said, hey, sometimes when they say do this, you just do this. Yeah. Having the emotional intelligence and the relationship with the person you're responding to is huge. Contextual clues of like, nope, I want you to do this. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. And that emotional intelligence, it's a hard thing to teach in a podcast for a few minutes, but like developing that skill to read your leader and know your leader and go, my leader's trying to accomplish a thing that I can help that person accomplish possibly differently, or my leader feels passionate about this thing. That's a yes sir, yes ma'am situation.
And being comfortable to ask those questions.
For sure.
Yeah, AJ, anything?
You asked, like, speaking to a lead pastor, you know?
Yeah, either. Just anything, any last thought you wanted to add?
We kind of already touched on it, but I think a lead pastor having a close relationship with worship, production, creative people is really helpful. Like, and getting the why, I want to know like the heart behind what they're doing. Yeah. And getting like, cause I want to bring the best songs. I want to bring the best ideas. I want to bring the right mood, lighting wise, and all that sort of stuff. And if I don't know, and we don't have that kind of relationship, and I don't have enough time to like respond and get ready for it, it will still be great. But I'm trying to make the most impact. So I would say giving the creative team enough time to actually pull and bring their creativity to a service is really, really helpful. Yeah. When we talk about a special event, we probably plan it for like 6 months.
Yeah, it's a long time.
And sometimes sermon series, not sometimes, often, we don't necessarily have them all that soon.
What we do, they just get changed.
Yeah, and that's fine too. That's fine. But like, I would love like, hey, this is coming up. Like when Pastor Rob texted me and said, hey, in 3 weeks, a month, whatever, we have this. I'm like, oh, great. Let's bring something to it. You know? Yeah. So that's just, things like that are so helpful because it takes time to pull off these creative things. Yeah. It can't just happen in 3 days.
Yeah, that's something that I think most people miss about what we do with big events is how long the on-ramp is. And I don't think it's because we couldn't pull it off if it was shorter. I mean, some things maybe not, but I think it's because the investment and creativity, that's something I've had to learn. I have a lot of creative skill sets, but I would say my natural tendency is to be more linear and just get things done and let's point A to point B, it's easy. And so I've had to learn working with, you guys and other creative people on our team to really try and understand that what they're trying to make is something beautiful. And what I'm trying to do is be efficient. And beauty and efficiency can work, but they're not always on the same plane.
Yeah.
And so trying to figure out even that heads up, it doesn't mean, hey, I'm going to need an opener and it's 4 minutes long. Well, that could be helpful, but also, hey, I'm trying to invoke this idea. Could you guys come up with some ideas and bring them to me next week, and then we can talk about it? Well, maybe he knows it's an opener, but then what if you guys like an opener too? Oh, well, now we're aligned. But rather than just cutting it off and saying, here's what you got to do, this is how much time you have, versus sharing, like you said, Caleb, here's what I'm trying to accomplish. Yeah. Maybe you guys could bring a better idea, even, who knows, maybe a cheaper idea, not always, but on how it could be accomplished. I love that relationship, and hopefully for people who are worship and production, this was valuable, and even people who are not, to feel like this was a connecting the dots on that. And I know you guys have taught breakouts at conference before, and those are on the network site. And so if there's any questions for Caleb or AJ, you can message network@rivervalley.org. But I want to say thank you for this crash course on special event planning, and hope to have you guys back on the podcast soon.
Thanks, Logan.
Thanks, Logan.